My wife and I bought a ranch in the mountains last year, and my neighbor had some interesting suggestions on how to manage our new land. Written by VatoCarbon. My wife Sasha and I have owned a small ranch since last spring, so we've now experienced all 4 seasons here. What follows is the story about why this place is special. Sasha and I moved to rural Idaho about a year ago when I got what is essentially my dream job working for the county here. We found a shitty little rental in the town where the county seat is a bustling metropolis of just about 3,500 people. The entire county has around 13,000 year-round residents. At first, we really weren't sure how long we'd stay. It's definitely the smallest community we'd ever lived in, and certainly a bit more blue-collar and conservative than what we're used to. But, over time, we really fell in love with the place. We both love to hike, camp, and ski, and I'm an avid hunter and angler, so being surrounded by beautiful mountains, canyons, forests, and trout-filled rivers to explore certainly helped us get comfy here. Sasha also had a great job that allowed her to work remotely, minus a day trip to her firm in Jackson a couple times a month, which actually provided us with a nice reprieve from the isolation of a small mountain town. We don't have kids, just our dog. We're both in our early mid-30s, we both had solid incomes for the first time, so we started thinking about buying property. The area was also developing rather quickly among the wealthy hobby ranch demographic as the billionaires pushed the millionaires out of Jackson Hole, and I qualified for a pretty amazing finance plan through the VA. That sweet mortgage, along with getting college paid for, are the only pleasant pieces of baggage I took home from 6 years in the Marine Corps. So we figured, screw it, let's look for some property to buy. Our realtor called us the morning our property got listed this last spring. She knew we wanted to find a spot with 4 or 5 acres, and was ecstatic about the price and said it was important we tour it right away and get an offer in. We met at her office that afternoon, and on the drive out to the place she explained how it was a 40-acre ranch owned by a family trust based back east somewhere, and that no one had lived on the land in over a decade. I guess the old matriarch of the family died last year, so the trust had the house remodeled prior to selling it and all the assets of the trust to split amongst her kids, adult grandkids. Long story short, the sellers were motivated and it would go fast. I'll never forget driving up the long driveway that leads from the county road to the house and seeing the property for the first time. It was breathtaking. It still is, every time I make that turn. The house sits on a little hill, surrounded by meadow and aspen trees. Spring was in full torque, everything was tree-frog green, wildflowers and birds everywhere. The land felt like it was just humming with vibrance. The house is much smaller than what we were looking for, only about 900 square feet smaller than apartments we'd lived in after college. However, it did have a big-ass porch, a landscaped fenced-in yard around the house with some big old cottonwood trees, a separate garage in decent shape, couple storage sheds, and a very old but functional hay barn with a few horse stalls. What stood out more than anything else is the fact that anywhere you looked was unbelievably beautiful. The landscape, without a doubt, is why we fell in love with it immediately. Outside the fenced-in yard there are about 25 acres of meadow with a pond and creek running in and out of it, and around 15 acres of pine forest that sit above the house, and our neighbor immediately to the east is a national forest literally 3 times the size of Rhode Island. We both loved it, but Sasha was absolutely beside herself with excitement and adorably giddy. I don't have much family, Sasha's my entire world. I got out of the Marines and moved straight into freshman dorms at a massive state university as a maladjusted 24-year-old fresh off a combat deployment. Would not advise, Marines. I repeat, would not advise. It was a fucking nightmare of emotional isolation and volcanic social anxiety. I quickly fell into a violent, whiskey and blow-fueled spiral of self-destruction, the kind that can only be stymied by falling in love. Meeting her brought me back, and I have no doubt, Sasha's happiness is quite literally the only reason I'm still alive, and I've thought about that every day for the last decade. So, seeing her react to the property with that much excitement and happiness was all I needed. The listing price was a bit above what we wanted to spend, but we kinda just decided to go for it. With a VA loan plan, and having convinced ourselves it was a sound investment, we were pretty much set. Besides, it was still cheaper than what our friends were spending. Houses in our expensive hometowns and the cities we'd lived in since, right? So, we said fuck it, let's just do this, and we made an offer. Got an email from our realtor by 6:30 a.m. the next morning saying they'd accepted our lowball offer without any counter. We were officially under contract. A few weeks later we got the inspection and title report, no red flags, so we closed the next Friday, moved in that same night, ate pasta off our camping stove, sitting on camping chairs on the porch, and slept on a blow-up mattress in the living room. Sasha and I were electric with excitement, and made one fantastic and entirely unrealistic plan after another for the property. Pretty sure that first day we committed to constructing ski jumps, a 10-challenge archery course, a tiny home village for guests, and several wine-drinking patios along the creek. The next 15 days of moving and settling in and planting our garden screamed by Dash, our hunting dog, was in absolute heaven. He'd never come inside if he didn't have to, and now he had a full acre of fenced-in yard, with a kingdom beyond. I'll never forget the look of wonder, excitement, and just plain old peace Sasha wore every minute of those first few weeks here. At the beginning of our third week in the place, we realized we were fast approaching the rudeness threshold of not going to introduce ourselves to the neighbors. There were other houses in the area, but we only had one neighbor on our road, a 300-acre ranch to the north, owned by a couple we'll call Dan and Lucy, who our realtor said were real nice. We made a couple pies, hopped in the truck and went to introduce ourselves. Their driveway ran about a quarter mile from their gate, through their pastures pocked with clusters of ponderosa and fat cows, and ended at their house. It was a nice place. Looked lived in. Stellar view of the mountains. Good vibes. Gardens were well taken care of. The house was nestled between a couple massive barns, a tractor garage, and a big workshop. As we approached the house, I saw an older look-in fella in the driveway turn to face us, then raise a hand in greeting and slowly walk over. "Y'all must be my new neighbors." Dan had a warm smile. "Yes sir, I'm Harry, and this is Sasha." Dan looked to be in his early 70s, but still quite spry. He had a calculation and strength to his movements. He had as many good years left as someone in their 50s. His hands were like buffalo leather, and his features looked carved out of wood. An older woman came out one of the barns right then as well. She looked around the same age, and just as strong. She looked wise, like there wasn't much left behind door number 3 that could surprise her. She introduced herself as Lucy. We introduced ourselves and exchanged the normal pleasantries. They told us how they'd owned their ranch since the early 1980s, how their 3 kids were all living in Boise with families of their own. They also told us how the family that built our place only visited once or twice a year, mostly just to hunt, and how that family also owned a mansion in Jackson and other ranches in Montana, so they were excited to have full-time neighbors. They were very grateful for the pie, and we expressed a sincere "please call or stop by if you need anything at all," which they offered right back. Right as it felt like an appropriate "till next time" handshake moment, Dan pointed up at me with a little smirk and said, "Infantry? Is it that obvious?" I asked in response, looking down at myself. He slapped his knee and proclaimed I can spot it a mile away. "Army or Marines?" "I was in the Marine Corps, sir, 0311. Dan responded with a grunt. "But wait, did you say was? I thought the only way out of the Corps was dead in a pine box? If I had a nickel for every time I've heard that one. Yeah, I guess once a Marine, always a Marine, so it said. But they told me you fine taxpayers would float the bill for my college tuition, so I jumped ship and never looked back." Old folks always laugh at that line, Dan and Lucy included. "Ha, very good. I was 101st, did a stint in Nam in 70-71. I've heard that was one hell of a time and one hell of a place to find yourself as a paratrooper, sir." "That it was, son. That it was. You make it over to Afghanistan or Iraq?" "I made a couple cameos in Afghanistan." Dan responded with a grin, but it seemed forced, almost apologetic. "I've heard that was one hell of a place to find yourself as a Marine." "It was certainly a colorful experience, sir." "I have no doubt." Dan's smile was replaced with an inquisitive look, suggesting a change in subject was, "Hey, you know, for the last 10 years the family who owned your land paid Lucy and some of our seasonal ranch staff to take care of the place. Mostly just keeping the trees and shrubs in order, grazing down the grass before fire season, checking on the well and septic now and again, and Lord knows I've spent lots of time there over the last decades riding and hunting. We know that land as well as anyone alive. We'd really like to share a few things with you, a few pointers when it comes to managing that land that we think are very important. Maybe we can swing by soon and spend an hour or two walking around with you?" Sasha chimed in as she often does, ever so promptly, "Whenever I'm given an opening to put off non-essential social calls that would be hugely appreciated. We'd love to pick your brains about the land. Does tomorrow evening work?" Sasha squeezed my arm. "Swell, thanks babe. Yeah, tomorrow evening works great on my end." Dan, Lucy, "That work for you too?" "Sure," Lucy said. "We'll swing by around 5 or so. Thanks again for stopping by. I hope you two make a habit of it." With that, we hopped in the truck and headed home. "Don't even start whining about me making that plan, babe. They seem so sweet. That knowledge will be hugely helpful, okay?" As usual, she was right. I know, you're right, I'll enjoy it. They seem like a solid neighbors. It's different for everyone, but interacting with other combat veterans is hit or miss for me. Sometimes I feel they're the only people in the world I can identify with, who understand me. Other times they're the only people in the world I never want to meet again. Can't really explain it. The next morning we woke up and decided the day would be best spent doing fencing work in the pastures. We wanted to get some sheep in the coming weeks to graze down the grass ahead of fire season, and several lengths of pasture fencing needed some serious TLC. It was a great day, just us and the dog out on the land. One of those spring days where you can just smell how close the long days and warm nights of summer are. That evening around 5 p.m. I saw Dan and Lucy coming up the driveway in their big old F-250, so we went out to greet them. We walked around the property for an hour with Dash at our heels, as they talked all about the well pump, told us about the aquifer and its nuances when irrigating at different times of the year, recommended how to care for some of the trees in the yard, showed us where the elk usually mess up the fences when they start to migrate down, showed us where the best mushrooms grow, pointed out some trees they reckon would die within the next year or two, showed us where the creek floods in bad runoff years. That kinda shit. It struck me right away these two had spent a lot of time getting to know the land around here. It was impressive, and humbling, seeing folks with this much connection to the natural systems around them. I wanted that. We walked back up toward the house and Lucy asked Sasha if she should show her where some wild asparagus grows in the pasture, and said they'd be back soon. Lucy linked her arm through Sasha's, and I could see them laugh about something as they walked off. Probably one of the cutest things I've ever witnessed. Dan asked if we could talk on the porch for a moment, so I asked if he wanted a beer and grabbed a few before we sat down. That first sip of cold beer really hit the spot. Dan took a long slug as well, then placed his beer down, and moved his chair to face me more directly. As he settled back in, he put his elbows on his knees, linked his fingers, leaned in and looked me right in the eye. It was a bit awkward, as he was staring down as though fishing for the right words, then looked up into my eyes with a fierce intensity. You know, son, while all the things we just went over will come in handy while managing this land over the years, there are a few other very important things I need to tell you about. A few things that are hard to explain, but you must pay damn close attention to. I cannot stress that enough. These things are important, do you understand? I couldn't help but smirk, an anxious reaction I have in response to awkwardly timed sincerity, I guess. But I admired Dan, so I put my beer down, met his gaze, nodded and said, sure, Dan, I'm all ears. What I'm about to tell you will sound strange, alright? Maybe even frightening. But you need to take me serious, son. You understand? What I'm about to tell you can, and likely will, save your life. You need to listen like I'm an NCO who's been in country for a year, and you're a green-assed fresh boot who just stepped off the plane. I usually find military-themed analogy like that cheesy as hell, but I could almost taste how serious he was, so I just nodded and held his gaze. I hear you. Dan nodded, then pulled some folded papers out of his jacket, and held them up in front of me before placing them on the side table between us. I've written down what I'm about to tell you, because you and Sasha need to memorize these things. It needs to be second nature, son. There are 3 copies here. Lucy is giving a copy to Sasha right now, and going over these same things. Do not lose them. Copy them. Handwrite them. Carve them into a goddamn plank and hang it in your bedroom. Whatever it takes. Now, no questions until the end. He folded his hands again, and began. You need to understand that there is a spirit in this valley, and up in the mountains up there, alright? Some kind of spirit that cannot be explained. The Shoshone and Bannock Indians round these parts gave a name to it I never could remember, so I just call it the spirit. Strange things happen around here. Strange and dangerous. The spirit has strange powers, with strange manifestations, and can be dangerous as all hell, son. It can get ravenous and feral. This spirit is not one thing, or entity, but it's what's behind or motivating the strange occurrences which you will, unfortunately, come to know. Dan's eyes narrowed. But there are patterns in the ways the spirit presents itself. It is not a spontaneous force. It does not act on a whim. It is fairly predictable. Its behavior, or its methods, are based on the seasons. Almost like it has earthly rules to which it must adhere. But if you anger this spirit, or cross it in some way, you will fiercely regret doing so for the very brief and terrifying remainder of your life. Do you understand me so far? I was kind of speechless, and definitely a bit creeped out. I was partly creeped out at what Dan was saying, but mostly creeped out by the fact that my cool old mountain man neighbor who seemed so grounded was now rattling on about something like this. I sat forward and leaned out trying to catch a glimpse of Sasha and Lucy, but they were out of view. Dan sensed my anxiety and said, "They're fine, boy, sittin' down there by the creek." I leaned forward and saw them sitting on a log in the meadow. Lucy is going over this same stuff with Sasha. I need you to listen clear. I nodded. Of course, Dan, I'll hear you out. What I've written down on that paper is the ways in which the Spirit will show itself to you. The ways the Spirit will try to get to know you, try to trick you. And in response to each of those manifestations of the Spirit, what you are to do in order to ward the Spirit off, to keep you and your wife safe. I learned some of these methods the hard way, but most I learned from a Shoshone elder I bought my land from. You may meet him eventually. He and his family still hunt and trap around here. Now, listen close. Dan leaned in toward me. Like I said, the Spirit manifests itself in various ways, but it's seasonal. The way you'll experience it now, in the springtime, is different from how you'll experience it in the winter, understand? So we're going to go season by season, starting with the spring, alright? Sure. The spring is the easiest, as the Spirit is not that active, and what you've got to do to ward it off is easy. There's only one way the Spirit manifests itself. It'll only happen once or twice, maybe 3 times a season at most. We just call it the light. It only happens between sunset and sunrise. You'll see a ball of yellow light in your pond, or in one of the little eddies of the creek running through the meadow down there. Okay? Looks like a Christmas light. It's not that bright, but it's bright enough. You won't miss it or mistake it for a reflection. If you see that light, stop what you're doing and start a fire in the fireplace. You don't need to freak out. Just make sure that you cease whatever is going on, and focus on getting a fire started. Not a big fire, not like you're trying to heat the whole house, but start a little fire good enough to heat up some water, alright? Once the fire is going, the light will go away. If it doesn't, fire's too small, add another log. It will go away. Once it goes away, everything's fine, you can let the fire die out. You do not need to look for the light every night either, alright? You only need to make a fire if you see the light naturally, as you're walking by a window or outside after dark and glance at the pond or creek. Luce and I brought some firewood for you, in case you don't have any. Remember to keep some for springtime, don't burn it all in the, you understand? What in the sweet fuck, man? I mean. Yeah, sure Dan, I understand what you've told me. Light at night, start a small fire. 10-4. He looked at me for a solid 10 seconds, and I didn't break the gaze. I felt pretty strongly he was fucking with me, and would continue to engage him, but wasn't gonna give him an inch more than I had to. Alright. Now, summertime. In the summertime, the way the Spirit manifests can be horribly dangerous, so listen close. But before I get into it, I need to ask you something. Do you have a rifle? Several. What caliber? Dan asked. Well, I've got a couple 22s, couple 556s, a 30-30, a 308, got a 30-06, a 7mm, I've also got. Dan put his hands up, nodded and cut me off. That's plenty, any of those will do fine. Just make sure to have one near the front door at all times, and maybe another in the garage, and always bring one with you when you're working on the land. But as a Marine, living out here in grizzly and wolf country, I trust you'd do that anyway? I nodded. Alright, in the summertime, the way the Spirit will present itself is through what we call the bear chase. It only happens between around 9 a.m. and 6 p.m., and it seems you have to be physically outside the house for this to happen. We've never seen it start while we were indoors. When you're outside, you'll first hear a man hollering in a deep voice unless you happen to be looking at the perfect spot, but when you look to the voice, you'll see a man butt naked, naked as the day he was born, pecker out dangling around and everything come running for his life out of the trees, with a big black bear chasing him. He'll be screaming for you to help him, begging you to save his life, and listen carefully. Whatever you do, do not let that man get close to you. This fence around the house seems sufficient. Based on what I've seen, he can't open gates or doors, or even climb over things more than 3 feet high, but no matter where he manifests, he'll be coming straight at you. So if you can get inside this fence around the house, or behind one of the cattle fences in the pasture, or even behind a big log, you should be fine as long as you keep that distance. The bear will get him. However, I strongly recommend shooting this man. If don't, the bear will get him anyway, and watching this man get eaten alive as he's weeping, begging you to save him, and shitting all over himself is very unpleasant. Dan took a sip of beer, and went on. Do not worry about the bear, it is not a threat, so far as I can tell it can't even make physical contact with you. The naked man is the dangerous one. Do not let him get near you or Sasha, do you hear me? He will tear you apart. It's relatively simple, he's not that fast a runner, and neither is the bear, it's like a light jogging speed. Just make sure that when you hear the yelling, Locate the bear chase, get some structure between you and him, and shoot him. The bear will drag him off. Is that clear? I almost started laughing at this point, but it was so creative and Dan seemed so feverish with seriousness again, just nodded. That's all clear, sir. Now comes the autumn. In my opinion, this one can be the most unpleasant. We call this one the scarecrow. It only comes around 2-3 times a season, but after dealing with it once you'll think that's enough for a lifetime. It can only show up at night when you're sleeping. Somewhere within 20-30 yards of the walls of your home, you'll wake up and find what is ultimately just a sort of scarecrow. It's a person-sized burlap and canvas doll type thing, with a pretty realistic face stitched into the head. 5 to 6 feet tall, with old-time pioneer clothing, sometimes a dress and bonnet, sometimes overalls and a straw hat. Feels like it's full of wet straw. Things weigh probably 40-50 pounds. It'll be in a casual position, either sitting in the grass, sitting on a bench or stone wall, sitting on the steps of your porch, or leaning on a fence post, something like that. It's never hidden either. It's like it wants to be found as soon as you go outside. There's no life in M when you walk up to M. You can poke it and it'll fall over, like it's just full of wet straw. But you gotta move M. See, they need to get burned. That's the only way. They need to get burned with fire. They ain't made of material like anything else, as once they're properly lit and burning, they burn fast. You ain't gotta coax the flames, they burn all the way down to dust in 30 seconds. Every time. They ain't all that heavy, but you gotta move M because if you're within 20 yards of your home when you light M on fire, well, they wake up. Wow, I thought, did he really just say they wake up? They wake up and try to get their burning bodies into your home. Burning your home down seems to be what they're dead set on, seems that's their mission. So, you gotta move M. And that's where it gets strange. They won't really fight you, but they kinda spasm out, and start to make noises, but only while you're moving them to wherever you're going to burn them. Never while they're still. Between 5-15 seconds after you start to move the things, they'll wake up very briefly. It's quite startling. They'll grab your hand, or try to stand up, or try to undo the rope you've got tied around M. I recommend moving M with a rope, to avoid direct contact. Some of M are strong, sometimes they'll even take a swing at you. But those brief moments of life are only like spasms, they only last 2-3 seconds, then they go limp again. Dan leaned back in his chair. There's one other thing, they're scared. I mean, they seem scared for their lives, like they know they're going to die. In those moments they wake up, they can talk too. And cry. Weep, more like. Again, it's a real brief moment, but they'll get a please don't or a oh god out during those spasms as they try to break free. Ignore it. They absolutely must be burned by sunset on the same day you find M. I recommend getting a good lasso when you find one, lasso it, and drag it to your burn spot. That way, you don't have to see M writhing around as you're moving them, or get too close to M. When you drop M in the burn spot, they go lifeless again, so it's pretty easy. They're real flammable, all you gotta do is throw a big match on M and they'll cook easy. Remember, they're only really dangerous if you try to burn M too close to the house. That's the only way they wake up and stay woken up, and you don't want that, alright? I was chuckling openly at this point, but I was still a bit creeped out by this one. Dan seemed uneasy talking about these things, and it was a bit contagious. I knew Sasha was gonna be, by this story. Dan probed me again. Son, did you hear all that? Yeah, sorry, quite an interesting thing. Yeah, I rubbed my eyes. This was getting so strange, my head was starting to hurt. These things can get a bit jumpy. Burn M away from the house? Dan nodded. That's right. Dan grabbed his beer and drank the rest of it in one long pull. I opened another. Dan took a deep breath and looked out over the land. Now. There's the winter. Last one. He looked at me with a fierce determination in his eye, like he was either gonna stab me or kiss me. For most people, the winter spirit manifestation is the easiest. That is to say, for most people, there is no winter manifestation of the spirit. But for you, I believe there will be. We call it the ghosts. The frequency of this one is unpredictable, but usually only comes around once a winter. Matter of fact, we've had a handful of winters go by when it never happened at all, and only once has it happened twice in one season. Dan pulled his bandana out and wiped his forehead, then looked up at the mountains to the east. He seemed really on edge. He then turned his gaze on me. I gotta ask you something personal, son. Is that all right? I was surprised someone could pause a recitation of pure, fantastical nonsense to engage in such a common courtesy. Sure, Dan, go right ahead. Have you ever killed someone? I mean directly caused another's death? Calling in air support that results in someone's death doesn't count? Yes, I have. Have you killed more than one person? Yes. Were they all in Afghanistan? Yes. I was getting impatient. If this cookie old bastard wanted to trade war stories, all he had to do was ask. This fairy tale bullshit seemed a ridiculous length to go to pry for morbid answers to morbid questions. How many people have you killed? Well, I know for sure I've killed 4 men. 4 I shot and watched die. But I don't know the total for sure. There were a handful of others I could have killed. I trust you know what I mean? Dan nodded. Some guy takes a pot shot at our patrol from a ridge above us, a dozen of, light up his position. We find him dead, no sayin' who actually killed him. Or you think you hit someone, they fall, get up and run off, could have just nicked him, or he could have gotten gut shot and bled out in a poppy field, no sayin' for sure. That kinda shit just happens. I ain't shy about this stuff, Dan, but is there some particular damn reason you're asking? Dan replied, well, if it's 4, you're lucky. I thought I'd killed 8 people in Vietnam, till my first winter here. Turns out I killed 12. What in the fuck is he about to get into now, I thought. He went on, you see, the way the spirit manifests itself in the winter, is through people you've killed. They'll show up here, on your land, together. It's like the spirit finds M somewhere, and lets M know the one who put M in the dirt is in a place where they can be reached. Lucy can't see M when they show up for me, and Sasha won't be able to see M either, but they can feel M, understand? Sometimes Lucy can even hear M. Dogs can feel M around too. Here's what happens. One day, you'll walk out and look around your land, and you'll see a group of men somewhere on your property. Maybe up there along the tree line, or maybe millin' round down by the pond. It takes M a few days to work up the gumption to get close to you. They even seem frightened of you at first. But eventually, they get the sand to get closer. After a few days, they'll get real comfortable around you. They'll be waiting for you at the front door, and walk you to your truck. They'll be outside the bathroom window, waiting for you to take your morning piss. You lay down to go to bed, they'll be outside the bedroom, screaming all night long. They're on you like stink on shit. However, it also seems they maintain some of their earthly personalities. For instance, I killed one NVA soldier early on in my deployment in 1970, I shot him through the spine and paralyzed him. After he collapsed in the mud, I went up to him, and gave him some water, and lit him a cigarette. I held his hand as he died. Dan had a tear roll down his cheek. Christ almighty, I thought, this guy is an open book. He respects me, I guess. He does his own thing when they show up, hangs back, smiles and nods at me, and'll even offer an apologetic shrug when the others get all worked up and start hootin' and hollerin' at me. Couple years back, I'm pretty sure he even chased off a pack of wolves that had been hanging around my ranch when we had a few early February lambs. Strange as it may sound, he and I have a bit of a kinship. A respectful bond. Dan wiped his eye. Anyway, the longest they've ever stayed around for me was 26 days. Usually, it's more like 12-15. Then, they disappear. But while they're here, there ain't a damn thing you can do about it. However, listen real close now, son, if they get in your house, they can hurt you, and they can hurt Sasha. They want inside, badly. They get hell-bent on getting in. There's only one surefire way to keep them out of the house, and that's the candles. Dan pulled out a 6-pack of tall table candles from his jacket, and handed them to me. Any candle will do, but get the slowest burning kind you can, like those, to be safe. See. While they're here, you need to keep 1 candle for each person you've killed burning from last light to first light. If you've killed 4 men, that means 4 candles need to be burning inside your home all night long. That keeps them out. Dogs help too, glad to see you've got one. They seem scared of dogs, so make sure Dash sleeps inside all winter long. That's about the thickening of it. But it's hard, son. It's hard on ya. Those days from when they arrive until they leave, well. It'll test your sanity. And it'll test Sasha's too. She can't see M, but to her, and to Lucy, it's like having a Potska ghosts around. But so long as you keep M out of the house, and you can handle their presence, it'll pass. Understand? I was visibly shaking my head in disbelief at this point, entirely unsure of how to even respond to such profound nonsense. He started to speak but I cut him off. Dan, sorry man, look, you'll have to excuse me, I'd like to check on Sash and Luce, I just want to. Dan returned the favor and cut me off. Boy, I told you, Luce is telling Sasha the same things I'm telling you. Y'all will have all the. You want to talk it over? Look, Dan pointed behind me, down near the creek, where Sasha was sitting with Lucy on a log facing the house, with Dash playing around in the water nearby. I stood up and walked to the porch railing to get a look at them. They were a good distance away, but I could see Sasha look scared. When Sasha feels scared, I feel violent. Always been that way. I could feel adrenaline surge into my hands and face. This fuckery was 100 over. I wheeled around about to light into Dan and kick him off my land, but he had closed the distance between us and was already standing no more than 10 inches from my face, with a hard look in his eye. A look I'd seen in men before, but hadn't for a while. Look here, shit kicker. I'm not pulling your chain, what I'm telling you is real. You have a new enemy, Marine. You understand? An enemy that I'm teaching you how to fight. You can disregard everything I'm telling you, but I will not watch you two get hurt without at least trying to help you by sharing this. From one grunt to another, sit down, shut up, and listen. Please, son. I let out a deep breath, and took another one in. What the fuck? This was so fucking strange. Whatever, let the old man finish his spiel. Alright Dan, anything else? He took a step back, put his hand on my shoulder, and leveled his gaze. You seem like a good man, and Sasha a good woman. I want you two to stay safe here. This spirit, it's part of living here. It ain't all that bad once you get the hang of the routines, but it can be dangerous. You can't let your guard down. I know any sane person wouldn't believe this right away, but as soon as you plant roots here, as soon as you make and feel this place is your home, these things'll start. I reckon you'll see the light in the pond within 2-3 weeks. I need you to do what I say, alright? You do not want to test this. I saw Dash run up into the yard, looked over and saw Sasha and Lucy walking up toward the house, arm in arm again. Dan went on, look at me, son. I ain't crazy, Lucy ain't crazy, what we're telling you is real. We have to stick together up here, alright? You will know this is all real sooner than later. I just don't want you to learn it the hard way. You need to trust. When that light comes for the first time, start a fire, and call us, we'll come on over. If you don't start the fire after seeing the light, and start to hear drums coming from that mountain, get Sasha in the truck and leave. As fast as you possibly can, you hear me? Lucy and Sasha reached the porch. Sasha looked at me with bewilderment and disbelief in her eyes, and Lucy took her arm from Sasha's, walked up to me, and took both my hands in hers. I sure hope Dan wasn't too stern in his delivery, but everything he said to you, she looked over at Sasha, and everything I said to you, is unfortunately true. Do exactly as what is instructed, it's all written down. Please call us. We'll be coming by to check in regularly, if that's alright. It was much harder to push back against Lucy, she seemed so strong and sweet, but I wanted them gone. That's fine, Lucy, it was nice meeting you both today, we really appreciate all the input, but Sash and I need to put our heads together for a bit, so we'll see you guys soon. With that, they left. Before leaving, they left a stack of firewood, some matches, and a bag full of candles next to the garage. Sasha and I sat on the porch, and ran through everything they'd told us. It seems Lucy and Dan really did tell us the same things, and it was all in the notes they'd left us as well. Sasha is a hippie, very earthy and into Eastern medicine, often smitten with the energies in places and things. She's not some damn Wiccan priestess or something, but she was pretty much on board with all this shit right off the bat. I wasn't. We'd finished a bottle of wine, and I was opening another. Babe, honestly, do they seem like they're full-on fucking psychos? Do they seem mentally disturbed? Why on earth would they come over and tell us all of that and permanently establish themselves as nut jobs as soon as they met their new neighbors if they didn't feel it was important to do that? Sash, I don't know, maybe they don't want neighbors here, and are trying to scare us off. Maybe they're part of some weird cult. Rural Idaho is known for those. Sasha shook her head. Harry, they're really normal people, and our realtor said they're highly respected in the community. Your boss even said he knows Dan, and spoke highly of him. That was true. My boss was a real down-to-earth dude and a real, when it came to judging character, not to mention being well-educated and having lived all over the world. I guess if Dan was a psycho-cultist, it would be very surprising for someone like my boss to sing his praises. And at the end of the day, I liked Dan and Lucy too. Until they started their little spirit spiel. I dunno, Sash. I mean, I guess we wait for this goddamn springtime water light, even if it is some battery-powered LED light Dan's gonna throw into the pond while we're at work. We both laughed. We agreed to leave it. I mean, we weren't gonna up and move, and if Dan and Lucy were full of shit, which they very likely were, who cares if we have crazy neighbors? We ate some leftovers and went to bed. I caught Sasha staring down at the pond every time she was near a window. The next morning I went to work, and we had a normal work week. That next Saturday we got more done around the yard and gardens, and finished hanging all our art. It really was starting to feel like home. Saturday evening rolled around and Sash had plans to go get dinner in town with some friends from Jackson who were staying with family in the area. I grilled up some steak and asparagus. After dinner, I was sitting on the floor of the porch, drinking a beer and pulling burrs out of Dash's tail. Fucking things are a real hassle. I lifted my beer to take a slug and something caught my eye from the meadow. A yellowish ball of light. In the pond. About 3-4 feet under the water. I'd be a lying son of a bitch if I said my heart didn't flutter, and adrenaline didn't start to surge. I stood up and walked over to the railing. Dash looked up at me, followed my gaze, and shot up to join me in staring out over the meadow. Fuck me sideways. There it was. I thought about taking a picture and sending it to Sasha, but I didn't want to tweak her out. I then thought maybe I should try to shoot it. I had my .308 rifle with a nice scope freshly dialed in the coat closet. It wasn't more than 120 yards away, easy shot. Maybe I blast the fucking thing, see what happens? Then I felt something. Something I hadn't felt in a long time. I felt like I was being watched, from the tree line above the house. I turned and looked up. Dash felt it too. He lowered his head, and his hackles went up, and I could hear him let out a low growl. I looked back at the light. It had moved. It had moved positions by at least 8-10 feet. We'll update more soon.